There is no such thing as an end-of-the-world guidebook, but by God do I wish there was. It would be filled with useful information such as where to find a stockpile of toilet paper, how to build a fire. Maybe even give you tips on how to handle insanely impossible situations, the type of shit ripped straight from a book. Like what to do when you're the last person on Earth and you come across a gigantic hole in the world. Maybe then I would have made a different decision. I would like to say it was human stupidity that made me jump down the pit after Bailey. Truth is, it was just desperation. I was never much of a dog person before, but I was getting to the stage where I could barely remember the sound of another's voice besides my own. So, when I first heard the quiet whimpering and soft, fearful bark coming from a gigantic mixed-breed German Shepherd, that looked more wolf than dog. I knew he was mine. Guess I found a kindred spirit or some shit. Hell, when I first ran my hand through his warm fluff of amber and grey fur, quiet tears ran down my face. All those months alone, and then for a few seconds, for the first time in ages, I felt vaguely human again. I followed behind Bailey through the dried bushes, collecting firewood from the beige, cracked ground as we went. It crackles and pops with every step, the sound of millions of snail shells breaking. Bailey wanders off and comes back with a few sticks hanging out the sides of his jaws. He drops them into a pile at my feet, wagging his tail happily. It makes me smile every time my monster of a hound nudges my arm expectantly, waiting for me to tickle his ears as a reward for every medium-sized stick he brings back. I swear I spoil the mutt. Giving him a stroke, he barks affectionately before he's had enough of my attention and runs off to collect more sticks. Bending down to pick up my own firewood, to add to my admittedly depressingly small pile, I hear Bailey barking in alert. I jolt into action, running after him to see what had riled him up. I stumble to a stop before it. The familiar dirt-brown earth underfoot turned black, as though there is a visible border marking the entrance to a new territory. A wave of warmth suffocates me. Bone-melting heat rages long after the last ember has already burnt out. I have stepped into a sauna after a night in the snow, sweat from the unrelenting heat already forming on my brow. If the dramatic temperature change wasn't enough, the gaping hole in the ground makes me do a double take. Even after a further 6 minutes of just staring at the pit, trying to actually register what I am seeing, my brain still can't compute it. The ground ahead of me is an abyss of darkness, as if God had permanently removed a chunk of the earth all the way down to the core. I look down at it, tiptoeing the circumference as if looking over the edge of a cliff. I could fall down any minute. The hole is encircled by ash-white trees, gnarled and marked with black streaks, like it had been clawed at by an animal as big as Bailey. The rest of the trees surrounding the area are charcoal. One touch and the soot leached onto everything, smothering it in a powder and forcing it to become part of the darkness. I choke on air that is thick with smoke, smouldering rocks and roots adding a burnt tobacco-like scent to the already rancid odour of decay and carbon monoxide. It permeates even the thickest branches. I feel as though I have stepped into another world, where the laws of physics and reason have been abruptly thrown down the very pit before me. The void is completely devoid of anything. No heat, no cold, no light, no sound. It is completely and utterly ambient. Flicking on my torch, I peer over the edge. The cold light reflects the side of the precipice, showing a gradient of various very jagged rocks, jutting out like overlapping teeth. Moving my torch to the side shifts the shadows, making the walls come alive, looking more reminiscent of scales. A part of me could be fooled into believing I am looking at the insides of Jörmungandr, the world's snake. There is a slight curvature to the rock face, meaning it looks less like someone took a cookie cutter to the earth and more like a crescent cylinder has been violently gouged out of it. Even with the light from my torch, I still can't see the bottom. My concentration was so absorbed by the stomach-turning anxiety this lifeless, bottomless abyss brought me, that I barely registered the blur of amber and grey streak past me and plummet into the darkness. I was left with two choices: live in my isolated despair, atrophying my vocal cords through lack of use, alone with no one and nothing, or traverse the rock face and follow Bailey into the abyss. Did I really even have a choice? I tied a rope. I had wrapped around my waist to one of the thin ash trees. I prayed that it was strong enough to hold my weight. I didn't give much thought to how pointless this was, until I was already lowering myself backwards over the edge. With each placement, I could feel the sharp rocks digging into the bottom of my shoes, stripping away the rubber soles. I was walking barefoot over 1,000 pieces of Lego. When my body was finally perpendicular enough to hug the walls, I began my descent. Down, 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 the line of rope already feeling taut as the light above me started to grow distant. Below me was still nothing but a chasm of black. If something happens to me, there is no one left to save me. Pop, 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 as if something was pulling elastic bands far beyond their limits. The rope was snapping. Fraying twine by twine, it unravels and breaks. Clinging to the wall, my rapid breathing creating condensation on the cold stone. I untie the rope and continue the climb. My fingers were numbed by the rocks that grew continually damper the further from the surface I got. Desperation to remain on the cliff wall tore into me. My fingers bleed. Rock sediment digs under my nails from the claw-like grip I fight to hold on the slippery stone. I feel as though my hands have been submerged in ice as I try to traverse down a wall of marble. I can't hold on. My muscles burn from the strain. Skin pulled tight over my shoulder blades and calves. I fumble around for my next foothold, my battered toes scraping against the wall aimlessly. Weightlessness is a sickening sensation, floundering like a newborn as the air whips past me, chipping into my already frozen skin. I get whiplash from the abrupt halt of my fall. I look up to see thorn vines wrapped around my arm, keeping me from plummeting to the depths. It holds me hostage against the rock face, and with every movement I can feel the thorns digging in deeper and deeper, shredding my skin as gravity slowly pulls me from their grasp. Blood seeps out my wounds with the rhythm of my pounding heartbeat. I hear a whimper echo around the inescapable black. It ricochets off the walls of the chasm. I strain to hear it in the dark, screwing my eyes shut to focus on the sound of what could only be Bailey. A ridiculous action considering the complete lack of a light source. A bark erupts like cannon fire from below me. With what can only be described as reckless abandon, I tear at the vines in a mad frenzy to be released. I drop to the ground with a splash and a thump. Water dirtied from thousands of years of rock corrosion coats my legs, soaking me to the bone. Back on some semblance of solid ground, I click my torch and call out to Bailey. He jumps at me from a narrow waterlogged tunnel. That also happens to be the only way forward. Resigned to my fate, I start to drag myself along the ground like an earthworm. My knees heaving through sludge as I follow Bailey in an army crawl. The constricting 2-meter-wide tunnel starts to incline. My ripped-up arms itch from the build-up of accumulated mineral as I pull my way out of the hole. Feeling for all the world like the remains of toothpaste being squeezed out the tube. Finally making it out into another even larger hole in the world, close enough to the surface that I see a speck of light, like a lone star in an otherwise starless sky. The rocks almost chiseled, more right angles than should be found in nature, and into the walls is carved a city. Bailey barks, it rattles off the stone, and one by one the city lights up. People. Actual people walk out their stone homes. I'm not alone anymore.
Please like, subscribe, and share for the next chapter. And I would love to hear any feedback you have in the comments below.